Boardroom Bound, Episode 91, Insights from a Tech Expert with Martin Rowinski. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Boardroom Bound. My name is Alexander Lowry, and this is the podcast dedicated to intentional leadership in the boardroom. My goal is to give aspiring and existing directors the tips, tactics, and strategies necessary to transform your confidence and build a successful career as a board director. Quick reminder, you can get all of today's show notes at podcast.gordon.edu. And in today's show, we're speaking with Martin Rowinski. Martin is the CEO of Boardsi. This is basically an opportunity network for executives seeking to find a board position or advisory work. And I'm excited to share this technology solution with you today because I know so many people in my audience feel a bit overwhelmed by how do you network for a board? What does that look like? How do I do it? How do I be successful? Well, there are sometimes better mousetraps, and that's what Boardsi has been working on. Martin's been there about 3 years trying to power this solution forward. And you can think of it like a dating app for people in the boardroom. Not quite exactly that, but it'll give you the idea. I'm excited to share this solution with you today. Let's jump into the show. Martin Rowinski, welcome to the Boardroom Bound podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate the welcome. I appreciate being on this podcast and looking forward to it.
Well, you're an example of solutions that I like to bring to our audience sometimes. There can be a better way to do the mousetrap, but I know you guys are working on something that I find really interesting at Boardsi and excited to bring that to our audience today. But before we dive into this great solution, which everyone's going to want to hear about, let's start with a background. So you're a technology executive. You've got 25 years of experience. Maybe you can give us a bit of a sense of sort of how your career trajectory went off, because it's always a good starting point for a conversation, and then led you to the point of almost 3 years ago where you really realized this is the space I want to be playing in now.
Yeah, thank you. I do find myself being on the tech side heavy, so spent a lot of time in that arena, been a CTO before. Been around technology since I was 14, just one of those geeky kids. Commodore 64 came about and just never really left since then. I'm grateful for my mom bringing me to USA or US. It's been, I was born and raised in a communist country in Poland, and just never really fit that box. Didn't seem to want to, even as a kid, just didn't want to follow the rules. Didn't feel like I was a sheep. So my mom sensed that pretty early and started planning on a way for us to basically escape. So we did. We came straight to California, and ever since then, like I said, when I was 14. Just got hooked on technology and loved it and creativity, and have just seen it blossom. And these days, now that I'm getting older, it's hard to keep up. So, I'm glad I have partners that are younger than me, that are, been developers, know many programming languages, and they kind of take over the day-to-day. But still having that background, I think, gives us a strategy that we can, keep growing and trying to get our application a little bit better. So that's kind of where we've been at.
Martin, it's funny you talk about the Commodore 64. I also remember those, and that was cutting edge back in the day. And you think about some of the early games that people played, like Frogger and other things. That's a good analogy, I think, to the boardroom. If you look about those sort of game system versus whatever the latest version of Nintendo and other ones are out there that we're all playing now, the way that the boardroom process has worked has changed dramatically over time, too. If we go back in the day in the 60s, 70s, 80s, it was the CEO's probably buddy from the country club, they would go out and have a round of golf and maybe have a cigar and a drink. And he'd say, "Do you want to join my board?" And he'd say, "Yeah." And of course, that guy would vote a nice pay package for the CEO, and it all worked out really well. And they might have their feet on the table and be pretty relaxed in the boardroom. It's not quite like that today. And it's interesting, the technology changed we were talking about from the gaming. So you guys are working on technology at Boardsi to change how people go about finding and connecting with board opportunities. Can you tell us more about where the idea came from that you could use a technology solution?
Yeah, absolutely. I find myself on top of, being on the tech side, always happen to be doing consulting, even when I was working or even when I, had another company before Boardsi. I would do side consulting, and I didn't really call it advisory back then. Definitely wasn't on a board of advisors or anything, but I found just people always, asking me questions or giving me projects. And as I matured through all those years, I just thought to myself, it'd be great to join, some young company on a board of advisors, maybe eventually be part of board of directors, and work into that. So I started for myself, just looking around and seeing what's out there. And I, didn't have the golf buddies to go out with and jump on their company. And like you said, that whole space has changed. So I didn't really find anything out there to help me out. Got together with people that I have worked with before, partners we've done other businesses, and we started putting it together, and here's Boardsi now. So that's pretty much how it started, from me kind of getting older and looking into it to creating it, and here we are. Like you said, almost 3 years later, still going at it, and every day I feel like we're just getting better and stronger. Just like every startup, we've definitely had our hiccups and mistakes and learning curves, and finally feel like we're getting into a flow of bringing the right executive talent onto our private network, and at the same time bringing on the companies that are in search of those executives. And that's going to be the sweet spot.
Well, so Martin, let's break it down and explain it a little bit. I imagine most people can envision a high-level tagline along perhaps the lines of a place where executives connect with boards. And it sounds really simple. Maybe that's the hard part, is making it simple and make it work. And how does it begin, right? So you think about this platform. Is it a chicken and egg thing? You're first going out and finding organizations that need board members, or finding good board members so you have a stable of people to bring together? How do you build something like this up and scale it so it becomes effective?
Yeah, great question. We were trying to figure that one out when we were getting started. And we decided to do it all at the same time. So we slowly were marketing into the executive world, and then at the same time, marketing and presenting ourselves to companies. And we found struggles in both. Of course, the same scenario you brought up is the same question that executive would ask. And a company, of course, would say, well, I don't even know who you guys are. I don't know what you can do. So for a while there, we had to prove ourselves. And, that's, most of the testimonials that are on our website are cases or, short case studies or not, that basically we were being tested, and we did it, and successfully were able to do it and proving ourselves. And now it's gotten to the point where our name is out there. People know what we do. And it is getting a little bit easier. Now we're working really hard to, we started bringing on some public companies, but that's our next level, is to bring on a really good number of public companies. Like you said, that buddy at a golf course, now we want to be that name where if they're having a meeting and they know that Joe Smith is about to be retiring and he's no longer going to be coming back as a board member, and they need to replace him or find a new one, we would love to just pop up as that name. Like, well, just reach out to Boardsi and let's take a look at their network. So that's what we're going for.
It's interesting when you think about, you're in California now, and we know about the California rule that changed not too long ago, where you had to have some gender diversity on the board. And there's also been a lot of talk thinking that didn't lead quite to the ethnicity diversity that they expected. The majority of the females that were placed were white. So you still have a lot of white company boards out there. So there's obviously been a lot of talk in the legislation and trying to get some change pushed through to make that more of a multicultural perspective. For example, 40% of California are Latino, and that's not necessarily represented on boards. So I imagine one of the solutions that you're proposing to people is think about how much easier it is to find talent, perhaps on a global basis, where I don't want to necessarily compare it to a dating app wherever you get to look for different characteristics and see whether someone fits, but maybe that's how people are thinking about it listening to this podcast now. So help us understand it a bit more.
Yeah, no, that's fine. You're hitting on, I almost feel like you have a mic in our office. We joked around a lot about, when we were structuring our application, we were always like, well, it's kind of like a dating app because in essence it is, we're looking for that executive that doesn't just have the skills that the company is looking for, but, there's whole other levels of emotional, and you want to make sure you have synergy on all levels, or else they're not going to provide to the company what the company is really looking for. So it all has to line up. So yeah, it is a lot like a dating app, I guess you can say. And hitting on California, and I know it's more than just California at this point. We foresaw that, and I know at first they were talking about female executives being on a board. I could have told you a long time ago that eventually that's going to change, and there's many reasons for that. And as much as this is now a rule and a law, and they have to have this, it's said that it has to come down to that, because I personally feel that diversification is there's so much power behind it. Actually, I just this month we're launching a book, and I was part of a book called Mission Matters, and there's one chapter in there that I got to write. So being part of that book was great, and I actually wrote exactly about that, the diversification of a board and the positives that come out of it. So it's funny that you hit on that as well. So yeah, we have been focused on that. Our private network includes a lot of diversity across all levels. Everything from, gender, obviously, age, ethnicity. I even look at it as, people looking at me in general wouldn't think, that I had any minority or anything. But, I was raised in Poland. I can bring a lot to a board as a member, as an advisor, just because of how I grew up was so much different than, your general person here in America that lives in this, what I call spoils of everything is available. And things are getting easier to get anything. I came with nothing, and my jaw dropped when I saw a banana. That's where I came from. So I think I can bring a lot to that, and I know I'm not the only one. The immigrants, they're very creative and very hungry, and they look at things differently than other people.
So this is really interesting. So you are an individual, and Martin, let's say you were eager to find board roles, and let's pretend you weren't running the company, but you were thinking about using Boardsi. When we traditionally think about how to find a board role, we talk about it as a network, and clearly this could be a part of it. But people who are of influence need to know about your credentials and that you want a board role. Help us understand how your technology can solve some of that. Clearly, someone can build a profile. I imagine it's probably somewhat akin to LinkedIn, which is the most professional, if we call it, dating site out there for how to put yourself out there. So they build the profile within Boardsi. What happens from there? I assume there's some fancy algorithms, but I'm sure there's more to it than that.
Yeah, and I won't get into the details, but I'll give you the basics. So yeah, there is a profile. It is mainly based off of LinkedIn, of course. As long as the executive has their LinkedIn up to date, we do go through an interview process to try to dig up anything they might have not thought about. Of course, we collect all their documents they may have. We're always hopeful that they have a board document. If they don't, we encourage them to build one. But yeah, so it's a basic profile that companies get to see and explore. We also tell them to update their LinkedIn because companies like to do their research, and they will go. And obviously LinkedIn is a public viewing site, so they will go on LinkedIn and read up on them on there as well. But so that's just the basics of it, meaning you jump in on the application, you can see all the different board positions that are available. I would say we're adding on an average between 5 to 10 new board position or board roles, or I would like to say companies, because some of those companies are looking to build out an entire board of advisors, which might include 5 members. So obviously it's not just one executive they're looking for. So we add between 5 and 10 companies to our platform per week. And that's starting to increase. It's been increasing for a while now. So we kind of go through the same onboarding process with the company as well, try to figure out exactly who they're searching for. So that's just the first step, is actually seeing those available opportunities on the platform. The second step is, as soon as we onboard a company, we get a pretty good idea. Now, of course, our success team doesn't remember every single executive, but there are some that just stick out. So they might right away be thinking of a couple of executives that might be the perfect role, but we go beyond that, and we actually have some specific keywords that they might be searching for within our algorithm of our database, and pull out those executives, and we do notify them directly. We get a bunch of information on the company. We have access to a few different private databases that we can get financials and other stability pointers for the company, so we can present that to the executive and see if they have any interest. If they show any interest, then we take it to the next step, which is an introduction call, and basically see where it goes from there, see if there's a synergy between the company and the executive, and then the step moves on, and it's pretty much out of our hands at that point. On top of that, so those are the very beginning steps of bringing on both executives and companies. But on top of that, within about 2 months of them being a member, we do a few special things on the back. We have what we like to call Tier 1 and Tier 2 network. So we have companies that we're always in touch with. We have companies that we stay in touch with, but not all the time. They might not seen the executive that they're searching for exactly. So if that executive comes along, or that executive with those credentials comes along, then we'll reach out to those companies and see if they're interested. And usually that's the best search, which is, like I said, within about 2 to 3 months is when that process kind of begins. And then we try to match it up that way. So it is an ongoing process for us. There is a lot going on. And we do have also 2 tiers of executives as well. We have what I don't want to say really VIP, but the executives that have shown interest, they have the time, they have the ability, they are looking for board positions right now. So they're part of our network. And then we have the outside the network executives that haven't shown interest, might have pushed us away. That number is a lot larger, but we also let them know if we don't have that exact executive, we will notify them and see if there is a match there, and maybe that will bring them onto the network and build the faith in Boardsi and what we do.
And so, Martin, when you're thinking about, you talked to say maybe 5 to 10 new organizations coming on board per week. Do most of those who are starting out see you as in addition to what they'd been previously doing, perhaps working in an executive search firm, or do they're moving entirely to the goal of using an electronic system like you guys? How does it sort of work for them? This is helpful for my audience to be thinking about what is all the work I have to do across everything in order to land a board role. And how are you seeing the landscape changing?
So the other change that we're seeing, if you want to talk about the company side of it now, that'd be great. That's the side that we're seeing is obviously headhunters. There's a lot of work involved in that. And we do, part of it is, beyond our platform. I wouldn't say we're a true headhunting firm, but there is a lot of personal touch. We do have success managers that are very involved in helping companies recruit exactly who they're looking for. And I don't think that space will ever change. I think there needs to be a human touch in that. I think our platform is great. It works, but I don't think it's ever going to take away the human factor. If it does, great. Obviously, it will simplify things and speed things up. But if that is the case, then I think we have a few years ahead of us to build out our name, and maybe then we can really be a dating site. But yeah, there is a trust factor there. There is headhunting. The thing that we're seeing that really is changing is the headhunting side of it can get really expensive, and it shies a lot of companies away. Whether they have the funding, whether their current board is against it, whether their investors just basically want to be really easy and say, hey, I have these 5 executives I always work with, let's just put them on the board. It takes away, because if you're looking at the smaller, the venture capitalists that work with certain executives or might bring on their, like you said, their friends all the time, it doesn't always mean that is the best scenario for the company. What we have found through our marketing, through our, staying in touch with these companies, is just like with, I know it's going to be a weird comparison, but almost like the refinance, the boom back in the day. You can send mailers to a person and telling them to refinance all the time, and they just dump it in trash. But it's all about timing at the end of the day. And if that person, went through something, or they just, something happened in their family and all of a sudden they need money, they're going to call the first, mail piece that comes to them. It's almost the same thing with us. We can keep sending them, and they don't need an advisor. And all of a sudden they get an email from us, and we're saying, hey, we have this great advisor or this great board member that can really bring a lot to your company. At one time you guys mentioned, and this is actually a true scenario. At one time you guys actually mentioned about expanding into UK. We have a great executive, feet on the ground. He's in UK. He's from US. He's, been there, done that. And that's exactly who they were looking for. And they just didn't have that person in UK to go and expand into that area. We kind of opened up that window, and next thing they had their market basically was opening up in UK thanks to our executive that we represented to them. So it is about timing.
Well, Martin, along those lines, I'm sure you talked a little bit about success stories that you have some on your website. I imagine there's some best practices, or perhaps even worse practices, you've seen through some of this process. I mean, if we make the joke about the dating site, like you would never date someone who didn't have a photo. They'd just be a weirdo, right? You'd move on from that right away. We don't need to do that sort of basics level, but I imagine you've seen a whole bunch of successes by people that do X, Y, and Z, and maybe not successes by people instead do A, B, C. Would love if you could tease out a bit for us and think about takeaways for our audience of like, gosh, when you're thinking about a board role, we've seen it. You really got to do these things or shy away from those things. What sort of advice would you give out?
Well, as far as from the executive side, the biggest advice I can give is be prepared, board documents, your CV up to date. If you have served on a board, great. Obviously, you have experience. If you haven't, I highly recommend education. And speaking of that, I'd like to push this a little bit. We're actually going to be releasing some education for executives here very shortly. We've been working on this with somebody that was on your episode number 20, Mark Feister.
Oh, he's great.
Yeah, he's incredible, and he's going to bring a lot to the table. We've been working closely. This has been taking a while, but we want to do it right. But if you're hearing this right now and you want to reach out to Mark, I highly recommend that. But yeah, all those things will help you. But the biggest advice I can say is time and patience. We have a lot of executives that will join our network, and not sure why this exists. I know that when they graduated college, I'm pretty sure they didn't right away become a CEO for any company. I'm sure they worked their way through and eventually landed as a CEO or CFO. So it took patience and time, but for some reason, and this isn't every executive, but we get executives that would join our network, and 2 months later, if they're not on the board yet or haven't gotten, they might have applied to a few roles and they might have not heard back from those companies, expect to be on a board already 2 months later. And the process does take time. I mean, we do speed things up for the company side by presenting them with executives that fit who they're looking for, but the process still takes time. And of course, the companies want to ensure that they bring on the right executives, so they're not going to take the first 5 people that applied and, pick one. They're going to interview them. They're going to do second interviews. They're going to do third interviews, and then finally present a package to them. And if it's a go, it's a go. If it's a nod, then they're back to searching. So I think time and patience is probably the other advice that I would give, because this isn't just applying for a, retail job where you're just going to scan and bag and say thank you. I mean, this is pretty important to companies.
And the advice you hear about expecting a timeline to land a board role is all over the place. And that partly depends, in my opinion, on how much time and effort someone puts in, how ready they are for the board role. And all these things compound sometimes with, say, luck on top, which follows on the preparation that you've done. So I think the rule of thumb can be probably at least a year, maybe up to 3 years, depending on, you might not have much time to invest and do a lot of the networking. I imagine when you're bringing people on board, there's probably somewhat of an expectation that you're setting around that. What is the guidance you usually give to people to put in your head it's going to take this amount of time?
Yeah, you hit it right on the head, because I think most articles that you will read, I think the average they say it's 2 years. So yeah, somewhere between 1 and 3. We give them the expectation of seeing what we like to call traction within 6 months, meaning they're going to be interviewing, they're going to be seeing companies interested in them. They're going to definitely see an increase in LinkedIn traffic, companies looking at their profile on LinkedIn. 6 months is about the sweet spot where things are really going to be moving. We're hoping to speed that up once we have the education process in place. And there is a few other things that we're putting together that are even going to be a little bit more helpful. But right now, I would say within 6 months is where you can really see the traction. And that's being pretty realistic. And, anywhere between 6 months and 8 months, hopefully landing your board. Now, again, this isn't a 100% guarantee, and I'm going to hit the timing factor again, because if you come onto our platform and you don't see that perfect role that you thought you were going to see, that doesn't mean it doesn't exist out there. It just might be a month, 2, 3 months away, 4 months away.
Well, Martin, with that in mind, as we begin to think about how we bring this all together for our audience, I'd love to give you a chance to make your elevator pitch. And I think there's 2 versions you have. One to the organizations that would come on board and would be seeking someone to join their board, versus individuals who are looking to be matched and find their board opportunities. And I'd love to give you your chance to give your elevator pitch to both of those groups.
Oh, I appreciate it. In regards to companies, I dare you to come to us and explore our private network of executives. They're ready, they're on standby. Let us save you time and connect you with the right executive. Every company can use, at a bare minimum, a board of advisors. It will elevate your business. In regards to executives, we have probably one of the biggest private networks of executives. We work with mid-sized companies up to public companies. They're all well-funded, and they're seeking your help. We need executives, and we can help you land your first, or if it's not your first, continue your board career.
Well, Martin, one of the ways that I like to see how things are growing and changing the industry is by using LinkedIn. I think it's just an easy public tool that really is successful. And I always have a sort of board searches going just to see what comes up. And I see you guys being appearing in my searches more and more, which I think is a good indication of probably the growing volume of opportunities that you have. And I appreciate you joining us on the podcast today to share this technology solution. I imagine many people are going, would be ideal if I could use technology to my benefit. And we were delighted to have you on the show today. We appreciate you sharing your insights and helping all of us to be boardroom bound.
Thank you very much. And thanks for having me, and thanks for your time.
That's it for this episode of Boardroom Bound. I really enjoyed chatting with Martin Rowinski. I love people who try to come up with solution to pain points. And I was excited to share with you today a technology solution which could help so many of you to think through how do you get started, how do you continue to advance on your process. We can all envision a dating site, or we're all using LinkedIn, and these are technology solutions we should grab a hold of. For some of you, they might totally supplant what you did. Others, they might be in addition to what you're already doing. But either way, you want to be thinking through this and whether it's going to be a fit for you. Now remember, if you head over to podcast.gordon.edu, you will find links to everything we talked about today. And please know that the Boardroom Bound team and I are so proud to be your go-to podcast for all things that connect, prepare, and empower you to land a board seat. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any of the high-quality content that we're bringing to you every Wednesday. Thanks for joining me today. I can't wait to share more stories and strategies from brilliant business minds with you again next week. Remember to keep tuning in to be Boardroom Bound.